Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a softly carpeted Victorian tea parlor where the air smells faintly of bergamot, starched linen, and the nervous ambition of people who have memorized 17 rules for holding a spoon. You push open a polished oak door and feel a hush settle over you, the kind of silence that isn't peaceful so much as deeply observant, like the room itself is raising one perfectly groomed eyebrow. Delicate china clinks somewhere, lace brushes against polished wood, and you already sense that you probably won't survive this without committing at least three social catastrophes involving elbows. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the imaginary but very judgmental Duchess inspects your shoes, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what ridiculously late or early hour it is in your part of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step forward, aware that every movement carries a strange ceremonial weight, as though the way you place your foot could determine the fate of the empire or, at the very least, your access to sponge cake. Silk skirts whisper softly as women turn their heads just slightly, offering glances that feel more like polite audits. A gentleman with an aggressively waxed mustache pretends not to stare, which somehow makes the staring more intense. You notice the walls lined with floral wallpaper, the kind that tries very hard to look calm while secretly overwhelming your eyes with peonies. A silver tea urn gleams under softened lamplight, and a faint ticking of a clock echoes somewhere behind heavy drapes. This is no ordinary tea gathering. This is a social arena disguised as a cozy afternoon diversion. The mainstream historical fact that hums beneath all this ceremony is that afternoon tea became wildly fashionable in the mid-19th century, largely thanks to Anna, the Duchess of Bedford, who found the long stretch between lunch and dinner positively scandalous for her stomach. Instead of collapsing dramatically onto fainting couches, she introduced a light meal of tea and snacks, and somehow this turned into an entire culture of poised sipping and silent assessment. You can almost hear her gentle ghost murmuring, "Pass the scones, dear," while historians still argue whether her primary motivation was hunger, boredom, or an early form of extremely polite rebellion. You take another tentative step, and the parquet floor gives a barely audible creak, which in this room feels like announcing your arrival via foghorn. The hostess, a stately woman adorned in pearls that look old enough to have their own opinions, inclines her head with a smile so precise it could be used for architectural measurements. Her eyes scan you from collar to cuff, not unkindly, just with the quiet intensity of someone deciding whether you belong in polite society or should be gently redirected toward the kitchen garden. You wonder briefly if there's a secret code for blinking too often, and whether your eyebrows are rising at an acceptable Victorian angle or dangerously modern one. A curious, slightly fringed tidbit floats through your mind as you observe a young lady delicately adjusting her gloves. Some etiquette manuals of the era suggested that even the way you stirred your tea could reveal your moral character. Circles too aggressive? Clearly untrustworthy. Teaspoon clinks too loud? Absolutely feral. You begin stirring with the nervous precision of someone diffusing a bomb, except the bomb is Earl Grey and the consequences are side-eye and soft sighs. Somewhere in the distance, someone coughs in a way that sounds suspiciously like judgment with bronchial flare. The parlor itself wraps around you like a velvet cocoon, all muted pastels and carefully arranged floral centerpieces. You notice a table stacked with china so thin it practically threatens to sigh if touched incorrectly. A plate of cucumber sandwiches sits nearby, their crusts trimmed with surgical exactness, as though rough edges could trigger a moral collapse. Your stomach growls quietly, and you silence it with a stern whisper, because even hunger must behave in here. A porcelain figurine of a cherub looks down at you, and you swear it is smirking. You are invited, or rather ceremonially permitted, to take a seat. The chair cushions you with deceptive softness, and you arrange yourself with exaggerated care, hoping your posture signals respectable guest rather than time traveler who panicked. You adjust your hands into what feels like a socially acceptable position, only to notice the woman beside you holding her fingers as if she's permanently poised to lift a particularly shy butterfly. Naturally, you mimic her because social survival now depends entirely on interpretive hand ballet. A gentleman nearby whispers something about Darjeeling being a trifle forward this season, which you nod at wisely despite having no idea what that means. You imagine suggesting a humble peppermint, but decide that transparency about your flavor preferences may lead directly to exile. Instead, you adopt a neutral expression that says, yes, tea, very leaf-like, quite commendable, which feels safe and vague enough to pass as cultured. As the tea begins to circulate, you feel the room soften just slightly, as though reassured that you have not yet committed a spoon-based scandal. Even so, you remain acutely aware of every small motion, every whisper of fabric, every gently raised brow. The parlor continues to hum with restrained elegance, wrapping you in a strangely comforting tension that feels both absurd and soothing. And somewhere behind all this delicate choreography, you sense the slow, steady rhythm of history breathing through lace curtains and bone china, inviting you to surrender to its beautifully overcomplicated calm. Section 2. You remain seated, trying to breathe as if inhaling the very etiquette of the room itself. Every movement, no matter how small, feels like a test. The chair beneath you seems to whisper, hold still or risk disgrace, and you oblige, spine rigid yet oddly proud. Posture here is not merely about physical alignment. It is about signaling self-control, poise, and an unspoken understanding that the tea ritual is both performance and meditation. You shift slightly, careful not to tilt too far, like a tightrope walker balancing over a very judgmental crowd of invisible critics. The mainstream historical fact lurking beneath your nervousness is that Victorians, particularly women, were instructed in countless manuals on how to sit elegantly, stand gracefully, and move with the air of controlled refinement. A slouch was considered a moral failing as much as a physical one, and proper posture implied diligence, respectability, and a subtle alignment with the hierarchy of society. You glance around, noticing that the ladies beside you do indeed hold themselves like polished marionettes, hands poised, elbows discreetly in, shoulders neither too relaxed nor too tense. You imitate them with the diligence of a student taking an exam on invisible rules. A quirky tidbit drifts into your consciousness as you adjust your wrist to the approved angle. Some guides of the time suggested practicing at home with weights balanced on the head to perfect posture, transforming simple refinement into a miniature sport. You imagine balancing a sugar bowl on your crown in the middle of your living room, and a small suppressed laugh escapes your throat, quickly swallowed because laughter in this room is surprisingly loud. It is remarkable how an everyday activity such as tea can demand such attention to detail, elevating ordinary gestures into near ceremonial acts. The porcelain cup in your hands feels impossibly delicate, its thin rim threatening disaster if touched incorrectly. You cradle it with both hands for safety, mindful that dropping it would not merely spill tea but shatter your carefully constructed social identity. A servant glides past, carrying a tray of sandwiches and scones with the quiet authority of a seasoned diplomat, and you observe the subtle sway of their wrist as though it is an essential measure of your own worth. Historians still argue whether this obsession with fragile objects and their handling was genuinely about cultivating civility or merely an elaborate method to reinforce class boundaries. You take a tentative sip, mindful of both temperature and tone. The tea is warm, steeped just enough to release its fragrance without overwhelming your senses. The aroma curls gently around your face, and for a fleeting second, the world outside the parlor seems irrelevant. You notice the faint glimmer of gold on the rims of the cups, delicate flourishes that add a subtle, almost imperceptible weight to the ritual. You feel the tiniest surge of satisfaction as you succeed in not slurping, spilling, or otherwise dishonoring the liquid. The room is alive with soft motions, lace brushing against silk, subtle shifts in chair cushions, quiet exchanges of glances that say more than words ever could. A young lady across the room flicks her wrist as she sets down her teacup, and you mimic her gesture with careful precision, marveling at how every subtle movement communicates refinement. Even the clink of a teaspoon is interpreted, an unspoken code of conduct that, once cracked, bestows temporary power or, if mismanaged, mild social humiliation. A small mental joke drifts through your mind. You picture a Victorian Olympics where events include graceful scone capture and longest continuous teacup balance. You stifle the laugh because humor, like tea, is to be consumed sparingly in this space, and preferably with subtlety. Yet the mental image brings a comforting warmth. Even in a world of strict etiquette, imagination can still tiptoe gently through the lines of decorum. Your hands hover over the teacup again, measuring the perfect angle for sipping, the angle that implies calm confidence without arrogance. The silver spoon beside the saucer gleams, as if silently instructing you in all matters of refinement. You obey, stirring gently, aligning each motion with the rhythm of the room, which seems almost to exhale along with you. Another sip, another measured glance, and you feel the smallest hint of belonging, an ephemeral reward for patience and care. A strange calm begins to settle over you. The earlier tension, the hyper-awareness of every movement, eases into a mindful observation. You start noticing the background details, the faint scent of roses, the delicate patterns on the wallpaper, the soft hum of conversation, all blending into a soothing tapestry of controlled chaos. Even the tiniest details, a tilted saucer, a subtle cough, the flutter of a lace sleeve, feel meaningful, contributing to the overall cadence of the parlor's life. You remind yourself gently that the point is not perfection, but participation. Even if your fingers wobble or your pinky drifts outward, the room has already absorbed your presence, and you are, for now, safely nested in this miniature world of grace and muted tension. Each careful movement, each delicate sip, is a meditation, a bridge connecting you to centuries of genteel ritual. You lean back slightly, appreciating the soft weight of your posture, the gentle warmth of tea, and the quiet thrill of surviving your first formal moments in this softly judgmental, exquisitely ordered domain. Section 3. You shift your attention from your posture to the subtle language of the teaspoon, realizing that this tiny implement wields more power than you first imagined. Each tap, clink, and placement carries messages that ripple silently through the room. A light scrape against the saucer might signal nervousness or a lack of refinement, while a gentle, deliberate tap could communicate agreement or approval. You lift your own teaspoon cautiously, feeling the weight of centuries of etiquette manuals pressing gently against your fingertips. The mainstream historical fact at play here is that Victorians took cutlery very seriously. Manuals advise precise spoon handling to demonstrate civility and good breeding. A spoon left standing upright could suggest rustic habits, while proper placement indicated refined restraint. Every action is a silent conversation with your fellow tea drinkers, and for a moment, you feel like a conductor of invisible music, orchestrating notes of approval, curiosity, or polite disapproval. You stir gently, practicing the measured back-and-forth motion recommended in the more reputable etiquette guides. You resist the urge to swirl enthusiastically, imagining the teacup tipping like a rebellious ship on stormy seas. A quirky anecdote floats into your mind. Some ladies reportedly practice spoon handling at home, walking around while balancing weighted utensils on their hands or heads to perfect elegance under pressure. It feels like a form of CrossFit for tea culture, a hidden gem of refinement that leaves the faintest tremor of amusement tickling your consciousness. You suppress a soft chuckle, careful not to disturb the quietude of the room. You glance at the other guests, noting their practiced movements. A young gentleman sets his spoon down with a soft clink, precisely coordinated with his remark on the morning's fog. The hostess's eyes twinkle as she lifts her own silver tool, signaling approval without a word. You mimic her gesture carefully, striving to match the exact tempo and tilt. Historians still argue whether this extreme attentiveness to cutlery was about cultivating genuine refinement or merely reinforcing subtle social hierarchies. Either way, the effect is mesmerizing. Even a minor misstep might brand you as inattentive, and yet when performed correctly, the ritual offers a quiet sense of mastery and inclusion. You attempt another sip, carefully lifting the cup in sync with your spoon, aware of the delicate balance required to avoid a scandal. The aroma of Earl Grey mingles with faint notes of rosewater, curling lazily toward your face. You notice the subtle shimmer of gold along the rim of the cup, tiny flourishes that elevate the act of drinking tea into something nearly ceremonial. You inhale slowly, allowing the warmth to spread gently through your chest, as if absorbing not only the liquid, but the calm authority of everyone else present. The room hums with subtle motions, the shuffle of silk skirts, the delicate adjustment of gloves, the quiet placement of teaspoons. You realize that listening closely to the clinks and taps is almost like eavesdropping on a secret language of civility, one that has been honed over generations. The slightest misalignment, the tiniest clatter, could betray a hidden weakness or cause a ripple of amusement among the more experienced drinkers. You, however, find the rhythm soothing, almost meditative, like a gentle ASMR of historical propriety. A humorous mental image drifts through your mind, a Victorian competition where spoons are wielded like fencing foils, contestants judge for grace, precision, and subtlety. You imagine awarding points for perfectly timed teaspoon taps and deducting marks for excessive pinky flair. You smile inwardly, appreciating the absurdity, then take a careful sip, reminding yourself that humor is safest when swallowed, like a delicate cube of sugar dissolving slowly in tea. You observe the interplay of gesture and glance across the table. Every spoon tap, tilt, and swirl communicates silently, yet powerfully. The person across from you lifts her spoon in a measured arc, and the room seems to respond with quiet acknowledgement. You mimic the motion, feeling a small surge of accomplishment. You are learning the silent language, one teaspoon at a time. Even the smallest movements are imbued with significance, each subtle clink a punctuation mark in a conversation that transcends words. As the minutes drift by, you become acutely aware of the meditative quality of this ritual. Your mind quiets, focusing on spoon, cup, and steam curling lazily toward your face. The delicate weight of etiquette, the gentle authority of porcelain, and the almost imperceptible signals of refinement create a hypnotic rhythm. You realize that in this room, even the smallest object, a teaspoon, carries stories, lessons, and a surprisingly soothing cadence. You lift your cup again, perform the precise stir, and let it settle with a soft clink on the saucer. You exhale slowly, feeling a tentative sense of mastery. You are no longer merely a guest fumbling through etiquette. You are a participant in a quiet dance of gestures, glances, and glimmering silver. The room, with its lace curtains and faint perfume, hums around you like a soft, ambient orchestra. Even as you sip, you understand that tea is not just a beverage here. It is a vehicle for focus, patience, and subtle connection. Your awareness drifts now toward the hostess, the self-appointed guardian of this delicate realm. She moves with a kind of velvet precision, soft-footed yet omnipresent, as though she exists in multiple corners of the parlor simultaneously. Every gesture, a slight nod, a lifted eyebrow, a hand resting lightly on the back of a chair, carries the weight of decades of subtle instruction and personal judgment. You sense her eyes on you as you adjust your posture yet again, not with malice, but with an ineffable mixture of curiosity, scrutiny, and faintly amused expectation. The mainstream historical fact here is that parlor hostesses of Victorian England often wielded immense social influence. Beyond simply offering tea, they subtly monitored behavior, guided conversation, and enforced the complex rules of etiquette that define gentility. Their approval or disapproval could silently determine reputations, social access, and even marriage prospects, which lends a peculiar gravity to something as seemingly simple as sipping a cup of tea. You're hyper-aware of each micro-movement, realizing that the gentle authority of one woman can orchestrate the rhythm of an entire room. A quirky tidbit flits through your consciousness. Some anecdotes claim that certain aristocratic hostesses would casually rearrange the seating mid-tea, subtly reshuffling alliances and gently testing their guests' adaptability and poise. You imagine being repositioned like a living chess piece, each shuffle a silent exam in calm obedience. You adjust your back again, mindful not to betray panic or confusion, your fingers resting lightly atop your lap in a gesture of compliant grace. She glides past your table, speaking softly to the person next to you, the words carried in a tone that is equal parts polite advice and knowing challenge. The corners of her mouth lift ever so slightly, suggesting amusement at both the ritual itself and your hesitant participation. You feel an odd mixture of relief and heightened awareness, as though surviving her brief inspection is a minor triumph in itself. Her presence is a living punctuation mark in the conversation of gestures and whispers that fills the room. Historians still argue whether such hostesses acted primarily out of genuine interest in the civility, strategic manipulation, or a combination of both, but the effect is undeniably fascinating. You watch as she reaches for a delicate scone, breaking it apart with the lightest possible pressure, and serve herself with an effortless elegance that seems almost supernatural. Every move communicates confidence, control, and subtle judgment, as if she is demonstrating the invisible standard you are striving to meet. You carefully mimic her motions, aware that your own scone is a potential instrument of social disaster if handled improperly. The soft texture, the gentle crumble, even the speed at which you bite and chew. Each moment has meaning. A mental joke arises as you picture an exaggerated manual of hostess evaluation techniques, complete with charts measuring eyebrow raises per minute and proper gloved hand angles. You suppress the giggle with a sip of tea, reminding yourself that humor is best consumed internally in a parlor of this kind. Yet the levity adds an undercurrent of warmth to the otherwise tense atmosphere, letting you enjoy the ritual without succumbing to paralyzing self-consciousness. The hostess's eyes briefly flicker toward you again, and you freeze mid-bite, suddenly aware that you might be the subject of subtle scrutiny for some minor infraction of decorum. Perhaps a fingertip that strayed slightly, or a sip taken at the wrong tempo. You correct yourself immediately, lowering the cup, setting it down precisely, and aligning your spoon exactly parallel to the rim of the saucer. The small victories in this miniature battlefield of grace are strangely satisfying. Each successful gesture, a quiet triumph in etiquette mastery. Meanwhile, other guests engage in their own subdued performances. Gentle murmurs accompany the rustle of skirts and the clink of silverware. You notice a subtle hierarchy of movements. Some people's gestures are definitive, authoritative, others tentative, like whispers of potential mistakes. The hostess glides between these microcosms, her presence both soothing and subtly evaluative, a soft orchestration of social harmony. Even the placement of a teacup seems choreographed under her invisible hand, reinforcing the idea that etiquette is as much about observation as participation. A minor humorous thought flits through your mind. Perhaps these hostesses were early anthropologists of human behavior, cataloging tiny motions, gestures, and glances as if the world were a lab of poise and composure. You imagine her keeping meticulous mental notes, evaluating every stir of tea and every delicate lift of a pinky, the results influencing future seating arrangements or invitations. You sip again, appreciating how these thoughts make the elaborate ritual feel oddly playful rather than oppressive. You take a measured breath, letting the soft aroma of bergamot fill your senses, and feel a growing sense of rhythm with the room. The hostess moves on, leaving you to reflect on the subtle authority she commands. Her presence lingers in the form of a quiet standard, guiding your movements even in her absence. You realize that her judgment is less about punishment and more about maintaining a shared cadence of grace, a framework in which everyone can participate without overt instruction. As the moment settles, you notice the balance between control and freedom, observation and relaxation. You are being guided, yes, but you are also allowed to find your own place within the silent choreography. Every gesture, sip, and glance now feels infused with meaning, yet it is not oppressive. It is a delicate, almost hypnotic pattern, inviting you to immerse yourself fully. Even a casual lift of your teacup becomes a statement, a declaration that you understand the rhythm of the room and are willing to play along, however imperfectly. A final whimsical thought drifts through your mind as you observe her glide away. Perhaps these hostesses were the original conductors of ambient social ASMR, orchestrating the hush, the clink, the whispers, and the measured exhalations of polite society. You sip your tea, let your shoulders relax, and feel that gentle hum of historical rhythm vibrating through the space. a quiet reassurance that grace, like tea, can be learned sip by sip. Section 5. Now your attention drifts toward the tea itself, and you realize that the liquid in your cup is far more than a beverage. It is an arbiter of taste, a subtle signal of refinement, and a surprisingly judgmental participant in the room's social dynamics. You bring the cup to your lips and inhale slowly, letting the aroma of delicate leaves mingle with the faint whisper of sugar and cream. It feels almost ceremonial, a moment suspended in gentle warmth, as though centuries of careful selection and steeping are passing directly into your senses. The mainstream historical fact here is that Victorian tea culture included a vast array of blends, each carrying specific social and political associations. Darjeeling, Assam, Earl Grey, and countless others were more than simple flavors. They were statements of taste, class, and even moral preference. Selecting a tea incorrectly could subtly mark a guest as inexperienced or overly adventurous. You feel the weight of responsibility, as though choosing the wrong infusion might spark quiet disapproval, or worse, a whispered critique about your character. A quirky anecdote drifts into your mind. Some enthusiasts of the period believed that certain teas could subtly influence temperament, enhance courage, or improve conversation. You imagine sipping a bold Assam before attempting a daring remark to the hostess, or a calming chamomile to soothe a rebellious pinky finger. It is whimsical, almost absurd, yet entirely in keeping with the Victorian penchant for blending ritual, mysticism, and practical domesticity. You suppress a smile, letting the warmth of the cup remind you that playfulness and propriety can coexist in small, carefully measured doses. Historians still argue whether these beliefs about tea's influence were genuinely practiced or mostly rhetorical, intended to elevate the simple act of drinking into a form of social theater. Regardless, the presence of such rituals adds layers to your experience, imbuing the liquid with more than flavor. It is history, taste, and etiquette distilled into a single cup. You notice the fine gold rim of your teacup, delicate as a whisper, framing the amber liquid like a small crown awaiting your careful acknowledgement. You lift the cup with the careful precision you have been practicing, aware that the angle, the tilt, and even the speed of your sip carry meaning. The warmth spreads through your chest, gentle and soothing, grounding you in the rhythm of the room. The tea itself feels alive, a companion to the soft rustle of silk, the faint clink of porcelain, and the whispering hum of polite conversation. You begin to understand that each sip is a quiet negotiation of taste, etiquette, and personal presence, a subtle dialogue with everyone and everything in the parlor. A faintly humorous image floats into your thoughts. Perhaps a secret league of Victorian tea arbiters exists, judging the moral fiber of society based on the aroma, temperature, and steeping time of a single cup. You imagine clandestine meetings in candlelit rooms, deliberating over Earl Grey, plotting reforms in gesture, and awarding ribbons for proper pinky elevation. The thought makes you chuckle quietly, careful to avoid drawing attention to your modern sense of humor. As the minutes pass, you notice the social texture of tea selection. A slightly lighter blend indicates modesty, a stronger brew hints at confidence, and rare or exotic leaves suggest a degree of cultivated daring. You recall that the hostess earlier selected a Darjeeling with near imperceptible precision, subtly asserting authority while inviting admiration. You carefully mirror her choices, aligning your palate and posture with hers, feeling a small thrill of inclusion and approval. A soft breeze wafts through the lace-curtained window, carrying the scent of freshly cut flowers from the garden outside. The aroma mingles with your tea, adding a natural complexity that the Victorians would have quietly celebrated. You sense a subtle connection between the ritual of drinking and the broader world beyond the parlor, where gardens, estates, and careful domestic management all play a role in this intricate tapestry. Even the act of choosing the right tea feels like participation in a larger, harmonious pattern, a gentle dance of refinement extending beyond the room's walls. Your hands hover over the cup again, fingers poised for another careful sip. The room's rhythm continues in its soft, deliberate way. A spoon clinks against a saucer, a whisper of silk, a faint cough, the subtle tilt of a head. You move in harmony with these cues, learning the silent language of tea selection and consumption. The warmth and flavor of the brew settle in your chest, reinforcing the gentle sense of control and attentiveness you have been cultivating. A humorous mental note drifts through your mind. Perhaps history itself is less about grand battles and more about the precise measurement of leaves, the perfect timing of a steep, and the social acumen required to navigate a teacup. You smile, realizing that by participating in this ritual, you are connecting with the careful choreography of centuries, experiencing history in a way that is simultaneously meditative, whimsical, and socially enlightening. Finally, you sip once more, savoring the combination of warmth, taste, and subtle power. The tea carries a soft authority, instructing your senses and aligning your movements with the ambient elegance of the parlor. The delicate balance of ritual, flavor, and silent judgment becomes a gentle meditation, inviting you to slow down, observe, and participate in the understated art of Victorian tea. In this cup, history, etiquette, and gentle humor swirl together, offering a uniquely soothing passage into the evening's quiet rhythm. Section 6. As the tea settles comfortably in your chest, your awareness drifts to the whispers curling behind the lace curtains. They are soft, tentative, almost conspiratorial, yet carry a weight that belies their volume. You notice the subtle changes in posture as heads tilt slightly, eyes narrow just a fraction, and tiny nods acknowledge information exchange in a code that only the initiated fully understand. It is mesmerizing, the quiet politics of the parlor, unfolding beneath polite conversation, like a dance choreographed entirely in glances and hushed tones. The mainstream historical fact here is that Victorian parlors often served as the social intelligence networks of the day. Gossip wasn't mere frivolity. It was a means of maintaining social cohesion, signaling alliances, and occasionally testing the moral fiber of a newcomer. Even minor information about distant relatives, a new china pattern, or a slightly improper comment could ripple through the network, affecting one's reputation in subtle yet meaningful ways. You feel the electric charge of this understated scrutiny, aware that every movement, every sip, is part of a broader social conversation. A quirky detail enters your awareness. Some accounts suggest that in elite circles, certain whispers were deliberately ambiguous, leaving room for personal interpretation, speculation, or gentle scandal. A comment about Miss L's new hat could simultaneously praise her taste, question her prudence, and hint at unspoken family dramas. You imagine the hilarity of misinterpreted hats cascading into long-forgotten tea table intrigues, and a quiet laugh bubbles up, easily contained by your practiced sip of Earl Grey. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of such whispered information served primarily to enforce social norms, or if it was also a form of early entertainment, a subtle participatory theater that kept the afternoons lively, yet controlled. You observe as a young gentleman tilts his head slightly toward the lace, absorbing a delicate exchange with measured curiosity. You mimic his posture, allowing yourself to feel connected to the subtle choreography of observation. A faint smile creeps across your face as you realize the whispers serve a dual purpose. They communicate important social intelligence while simultaneously soothing and focusing the room. The sound is barely audible, yet it contributes to the gentle cadence of the parlor. Each utterance becomes a soft percussion in the ambient symphony of etiquette and refinement. You notice the hostess leaning slightly forward, her gloved hand poised to intercept or acknowledge, every movement calculated to maintain decorum while subtly participating in the unseen social currents. You glance out the window, the lace curtains filtering the late afternoon light into soft patterns on the carpet. The room feels simultaneously intimate and expansive, a stage upon which countless micro-narratives unfold. Each whisper, each tilt of a head, each subtle eye movement carries significance, forming an intricate web of interaction. You imagine recording these minute details for posterity, as if documenting an invisible ballet of social grace. Another whimsical thought enters. Perhaps each whisper is like a tiny ripple in a pond of civility, with consequences far beyond immediate comprehension. A softly spoken comment about tea leaves might influence seating arrangements weeks later, or inspire someone to try a new blend in a different city entirely. You smile at the absurdity and elegance of it all, feeling strangely privileged to witness the intricate mechanics of polite society in motion. Your own small gestures become deliberate acts of participation. You lean slightly to hear the softest murmur, tilt your head just so, and allow your eyes to follow the arc of subtle signals between guests. You sip your tea carefully, timing each swallow so as not to interrupt the delicate cadence of whispers. There is comfort in this order, a gentle rhythm that guides your senses and allows your mind to relax into attentive observation without pressure. The aroma of tea mingles with the faint perfume drifting from nearby guests, creating a complex, soothing olfactory landscape. Each scent reinforces the feeling of ritual and refinement, reminding you that every detail, the lace, the scent, the whispers, is part of a holistic sensory experience. You feel an alignment between your breathing, your sipping, and the quiet murmurs, a soft synchronization that almost feels meditative. Finally, you notice a small detail that delights you. A young lady places her fan over her mouth as she whispers, a gesture both practical and laden with subtle meaning. You mimic her briefly, aware of the gentle performance in every action, appreciating how these small behaviors communicate far more than words ever could. The parlor, with its lace, silver, and whispered secrets, envelops you in a delicate balance of observation and participation, teaching you that even in silence, the world is alive with stories, small dramas, and soft social symphonies. Finally, you set the cup down with care, the soft clink of porcelain on saucer punctuating the quiet accomplishment. You exhale, allowing your shoulders to drop fractionally, appreciating the small victory of surviving the ceremonial sip unscathed. The room, the tea, the whispers, and the gentle authority of the hostess all seem to breathe together, and you feel yourself settling more deeply into the tranquil cadence of this refined world. Your attention now drifts to the scones and small pastries arranged elegantly on silver trays across the table. They glimmer softly under the afternoon light, crusts delicately browned, interiors promising a tender crumb. Each one seems to carry a subtle weight of expectation, as if their proper consumption could make or break a social reputation. You pick up a scone with cautious reverence, aware that in this room even buttering incorrectly might invite a polite but unmistakable critique. The air smells faintly of baked goods, mingling with the bergamot of your tea to create a sensory tableau that feels almost sacred in its precision. The mainstream historical fact here is that Victorian afternoon tea included not just tea but a small assortment of carefully prepared sandwiches, scones, and pastries. Scones, in particular, were often served split and lightly buttered or jammed by the host or hostess, and consuming them required a delicate balance of etiquette and practicality. How one cut, buttered, or nibbled a scone could communicate refinement or lack thereof. You try to remember the rules, recalling that the tip of the knife should never scrape the plate loudly, and butter should be applied with gentle, decisive motions. A quirky detail drifts into your awareness. Some etiquette manuals suggested applying butter with the pinky slightly raised and maintaining an exact distance from the edge of the plate, lest crumbs escape and signify moral laxity. You imagine practicing this in front of a mirror at home, a miniature training ground for an elaborate, crumb-sensitive battlefield of grace. You suppress a small laugh, noting how even the humblest pastry becomes a vessel of social instruction. Historians still argue whether these rigid practices were universally followed or mostly aspirational ideals presented in etiquette guides. Regardless, they provide a fascinating lens into the values and anxieties of Victorian society, highlighting the meticulous attention to detail expected in even the simplest of domestic rituals. You lift your scone, ready to apply your carefully spread butter, and feel a small thrill at participating in a centuries-old tradition of culinary poise. The warmth of your teacup contrasts gently with the tender scone in your hand. You break a small piece off and savor the texture, noticing how the delicate crumb mirrors the refinement of the room itself. The aroma of baked dough mingles with fragrant jams, a sensory dialogue as nuanced as any whispered exchange across the parlor. Each bite is a small exercise in mindfulness, a lesson in both flavor and finesse, A mental image surfaces. A Victorian scone competition, judges measuring crumb alignment, butter distribution, and jam symmetry with merciless precision. You suppress a quiet giggle, imagining ribbons and accolades for best crumb control and most elegant jam spread. Even in its absurdity, the thought deepens your appreciation for the tiny dramas enacted over tea and pastry. As you nibble, you notice the subtle interplay between guests. A gentle exchange of glances accompanies the passing of a tray, signaling unspoken approval or mild envy. These cues are delicate but unmistakable, requiring careful observation and near instantaneous judgment. You mirror the motions of your neighbors, subtly aligning your gestures with theirs, integrating yourself into the flowing choreography of the room. The hostess glides past again, subtly adjusting a napkin here, leaning slightly toward a guest there, orchestrating the room with a combination of authority and grace. You realize that the seemingly mundane act of consuming scones is in fact a layered interaction, involving attention to etiquette, observation of others, and nuanced participation in a social ballet that transcends the table itself. A humorous thought surfaces. Perhaps history itself might have been more digestible if more events were settled over carefully buttered scones, with whispered glances serving as diplomacy. You allow the whimsy to sit alongside the seriousness of the ritual, enjoying the balance between historical gravity and gentle absurdity. You savor another bite, letting the buttery softness melt in your mouth, and pair it with a measured sip of tea. The room hums gently around you, a symphony of clinking porcelain, rustling skirts, and soft, approving murmurs. Each sensory detail reinforces the rhythm of etiquette, a calming cadence that slowly wraps itself around your consciousness. You feel yourself sinking deeper into the subtle pleasures of ritual, each bite a meditation, each sip a bridge to centuries of refined practice. Finally, as you set your fork down with gentle precision, you notice the way the light glimmers off the tray, highlighting the tiny imperfections and perfect flourishes alike. You inhale, allowing the scent of baked goods and tea to mingle with the ambient elegance of the parlor, and exhale slowly, settling further into the tranquil rhythm of historical ritual. In this moment, you realize that even the simplest act, eating a scone, can carry beauty, humor, and a quietly profound sense of connection across time. Your gaze drifts upward, noticing the delicate china adorning the table, each cup and saucer etched with intricate patterns that shimmer softly under the ambient light. You realize that these objects are more than mere vessels. They are instruments of status, taste, and subtle influence. The pattern, weight, and even the placement of each piece convey messages that ripple silently through the room, signaling refinement, prudence, and cultivated discernment. You cradle your own cup, aware that the touch of porcelain against skin carries centuries of practice and expectation. The mainstream historical fact here is that Victorian tea sets were often meticulously curated with elaborate designs and matching patterns reflecting social standing and aesthetic sensibility. Some families maintain vast collections, rotating pieces for specific occasions, with the understanding that mismatched or damaged china could subtly diminish perceived elegance. You marvel at the thought that even in such a controlled, genteel environment, tiny details carried meaning far beyond their apparent function. A quirky detail drifts into your awareness. Certain tea sets were rumored to incorporate coded motifs, flowers representing virtues, geometric patterns hinting at loyalty or family alliances. You imagine a secret language of petals and spirals, whispering messages to anyone attuned to subtle symbolism. A soft smile creeps across your face as you picture someone nervously decoding a floral arrangement while attempting to sip tea without drawing attention. Historians still argue whether these symbols were widely recognized or mostly fanciful embellishments promoted in catalogs and social guides. Nevertheless, the possibility adds a layer of playful intrigue, turning the act of tea drinking into a gentle game of observation and interpretation. You tilt your cup just so, watching the subtle reflection of light on the gold trim, imagining it as a signal of your own understanding of the room's unspoken rules. The hostess glides by once again, adjusting a cup or repositioning a napkin with the lightest touch. You notice how her gestures harmonize with the placement of china, creating a rhythm that feels both natural and deliberate. Each movement is a quiet choreography, linking object, motion, and observer in a seamless web of grace. You participate silently, aligning your posture, sip, and glance with the ambient flow, feeling the gentle satisfaction of subtle synchrony. A mental joke flits through your mind. Perhaps every Victorian tea set contained a hidden test, a playful evaluation of wit, observation, and patience. You imagine an elaborate China Olympics, awarding points for perfect placement, careful tilts, and the successful deciphering of floral codes. You stifle a quiet laugh, letting the humor intermingle with the calming cadence of the room, finding joy in both the ritual and the whimsical mental exercise. The aroma of tea mingles with faint traces of polished wood, waxed surfaces, and flower-scented perfume, forming an olfactory symphony that anchors your awareness. Each detail reinforces the sense of deliberate calm, the soft authority of the hostess, and the gentle rigor of etiquette. You notice the subtle shine on the edges of your cup, the glint of silver on teaspoons, the muted patterns reflected on the tablecloth, and feel a growing appreciation for the sensory richness of the ritual. As you lift your cup, the porcelain feels both fragile and sturdy, a delicate balance that mirrors the social tensions within the room. You sip slowly, savoring warmth and flavor, and notice how the soft reflections of china on polished surfaces create a soothing visual rhythm. Even in motion, the cups communicate. A careful tilt signals attentiveness, a precise placement conveys respect, a subtle shift of pattern alignment hints at social alignment. You participate in this conversation silently, aware that every gesture contributes to the collective cadence. A humorous thought surfaces. Perhaps some historians will one day study Victorian etiquette through the subtle geometry of teacups, deciphering social hierarchies via pattern alignment and reflective light. You imagine footnotes devoted to the precise angle of a saucer's gold trim, or dissertations on the optimal sip-to-swatch ratio. The thought makes you smile, highlighting the absurdity and charm embedded in ritual and deepening your appreciation for the playfulness of historical observation. Finally, you set the cup down with care, aligning it with the others on the table. The soft clink punctuates the ambient hum of whispers, rustling skirts, and gentle movements. You inhale slowly, allowing the warmth and subtle fragrance of tea to settle within you, while your eyes take in the intricate china patterns one last time. In this moment, you recognize that objects, gestures, and scents are all woven into a harmonious tapestry of sensory and social experience, a quiet, elegant rhythm that invites both attention and relaxation. Your attention drifts to the softly ticking clock perched on a nearby mantelpiece, its gentle rhythm punctuating the subtle orchestration of the parlor. You notice how time itself seems to behave differently here, slowed, deliberate, measured in soft clicks and the quiet rustle of silk. Each tick reminds you that every gesture, the lifting of a cup, the delicate tilt of a spoon, the whisper of a skirt, is embedded in a temporal rhythm that is as important as any movement itself. You feel the room's heartbeat syncing with your own, a gentle cadence that encourages calm, observation, and subtle participation. The mainstream historical fact is that Victorian parlors often emphasize the orchestration of time in social rituals. Tea service was structured in careful increments. The first course of sandwiches followed by scones, pastries, and finally fruit or petit fours, all measured to maintain a delicate balance of appetite, conversation, and attentiveness. Guests were expected to participate in this temporal choreography, pacing themselves to the rhythm of the room and its host. You notice how this measured time subtly encourages mindfulness and attentiveness that borders on meditative. A quirky tidbit flits through your awareness. Some enthusiasts of the era reportedly timed their tea sips according to clockwork, practicing the perfect pause between gestures and conversation to maintain an aura of refined control. You picture a group of friends silently synchronizing sips to the ticking of a mantel clock, an unspoken competition in poise and patience. The thought makes you smirk quietly, appreciating the interplay of whimsy and ritual in historical life. Historians still argue whether the exacting attention to temporal rhythm was more about genuine mindfulness, social display, or subtle enforcement of hierarchy. Whatever the case, the structured passage of time adds a gentle, almost hypnotic quality to the proceedings, a rhythm that encourages calm focus and immersion in the present moment. You inhale slowly, aligning your breath with the tick-tock of the clock, and exhale gently, feeling your body soften into the ambient pace. Your fingers hover briefly over the teacup, observing the way the warm liquid shifts with your subtle movements. You realize that even the timing of a sip can influence the flow of the room's rhythm. Drink too quickly, and you risk appearing impatient. Linger too long, and you might seem detached or inattentive. The gentle tension of temporal awareness heightens the pleasure of participation, turning each moment into a conscious meditation on presence, patience, and subtle grace. A soft laugh nudges the edge of your consciousness as you imagine Victorian guides devoted entirely to optimal sip timing, complete with diagrams, charts, and hypothetical penalties for temporal misalignment. You sip carefully, aware of the humor, but respecting the quiet authority of the ritual. The blend of playfulness and precision becomes a comforting duality, making the passage of time both engaging and soothing. The hostess glides past, adjusting a napkin here, a teacup there, harmonizing movement with the ticking rhythm of the room. Her actions demonstrate how mastery of temporal awareness can orchestrate subtle social order. A slight pause before a gesture, a delayed glance, a calculated shift of weight, all synchronized to the soft beat of the clock. You follow along unconsciously, timing your own gestures with a newfound awareness, and feel a satisfying sense of participation in the collective rhythm. The quiet hum of conversation resumes gently between sips, punctuated by the soft clink of silver and porcelain. Each guest seems attuned to the temporal structure of the ritual, creating a subtle symphony of measured gestures and controlled pauses. You notice the way the clock's rhythm acts as an anchor, drawing your attention back whenever your mind wanders. Even the smallest movements, placing a teaspoon, adjusting a napkin, feel amplified, as if the passage of time itself is a co-conspirator in the orchestrated calm. A whimsical thought enters. Perhaps the Victorian parlor was the original metronome for social conduct, teaching participants not just etiquette, but the gentle art of temporal awareness. You allow yourself a small smile, appreciating how the simple tick of a clock can transform ordinary moments into something quietly extraordinary. You sip your tea in harmony with the rhythmic cadence, the warmth spreading through your chest and reinforcing a sense of calm, focus, and gentle delight. Finally, you rest your cup, noticing the way its weight aligns with the soft tick-tock, the polished silver reflecting muted sunlight, and the patterned tablecloth anchoring the scene. The measured rhythm of time, the warmth of the tea, and the orchestrated motions of the parlor combine to create a meditative, subtly hypnotic experience. You inhale deeply, exhaling slowly, feeling both present and suspended, a quiet participant in a timeless dance of grace, observation, and delicate ritual. Your gaze now wanders toward the subtle interplay of conversation unfolding across the room. Words are spoken softly, often in half-formed sentences, accompanied by delicate gestures, the tilt of a head, the faint raising of an eyebrow, the briefest touch of a gloved hand. You notice that each remark is measured for tone, content, and timing, a careful balancing act that communicates wit, refinement, and attentiveness simultaneously. Participating requires patience, awareness, and a gentle sensitivity to the unspoken rules of dialogue. You take a slow sip of tea, letting the warmth steady your focus, preparing to navigate this intricate dance of words and gestures. The mainstream historical fact here is that conversation in Victorian parlors was highly structured. Guests were expected to contribute with polite wit, relevant anecdotes, and careful avoidance of taboo subjects. The art of conversation was considered essential to social refinement, and skilled conversationalists could influence opinion, reveal intelligence, or subtly manipulate social hierarchies, all while maintaining an appearance of ease and charm. You feel the weight of expectation, aware that even a poorly timed comment could ripple subtly through the room's social fabric. A quirky detail surfaces. Some Victorian manuals suggested rehearsing anecdotes at home, even noting the precise number of sentences to tell a story effectively, the pauses for laughter, and the correct pitch for delivery. You imagine an aspiring raconteur standing in front of a mirror, practicing the lift of an eyebrow and the measured delivery of a story about a cousin's minor mishap. The mental image makes you chuckle quietly, careful not to disrupt the room's gentle cadence. Historians still argue whether such prescriptive conversational rules were widely followed or largely aspirational. Regardless, the emphasis on measured attentive speech created a subtle rhythm that guided interactions, encouraging mindfulness and delicate social awareness. You notice a soft pause in the conversation near you and instinctively mirror it, aligning your own breathing and posture with the quiet flow of dialogue. Your attention is drawn to a young woman describing her recent visit to a distant estate. Her words are soft but vivid, painting images of manicured gardens, delicate fountains, and the faint aroma of roses drifting through marble halls. You imagine yourself walking alongside her, barefoot on dewy grass, inhaling the faint perfume of blooms, feeling slightly scandalized by her insistence on a particular flower's political symbolism. You sip your tea slowly, letting the warmth carry both flavor and gentle amusement. A humorous thought surfaces. Perhaps every conversational anecdote was secretly a test, evaluating listeners' attention, memory, and subtle judgment skills. You envision a secret Victorian scoring system where guests receive points for subtle nods, discreet smiles, or well-timed laughter. You allow yourself a small smile, appreciating the layered interplay between history, humor, and social observation. The hostess moves through the room, her presence subtly guiding the conversation. She offers brief interjections, soft affirmations, or gentle clarifications, always maintaining the rhythm and focus of dialogue. You notice how her influence encourages a kind of harmonious orchestration. Topics unfold with delicate pacing, interruptions are rare, and each speaker is subtly guided to contribute without dominance. You adjust your own responses accordingly, aware of the invisible hand shaping the room's cadence. A quirky light detail catches your attention. A small silver bell on the mantel is occasionally rung to signal a change in topic or to draw attention back to the host's intended rhythm. You imagine the bell as an unspoken conductor's baton, controlling tempo, tone, and flow. Each soft ring elicits micro-adjustments in posture, glance, and speech, reinforcing the elegant choreography of etiquette. As you participate quietly, listening and observing, you feel a growing sense of attunement. Your mind relaxes into the flow of conversation, aware of social rhythms, bodily cues, and tonal subtleties. The ambient warmth of tea, the soft tick-tock of the clock, and the gentle rise and fall of voices blend into a soothing background symphony. Each detail, small and deliberate, contributes to a sense of immersion in a living tableau of Victorian social life. Finally, you exhale, settling further into your chair and allowing the measured cadence of dialogue to wash over you. The interplay of words, gestures, and silent cues becomes a meditation in itself, a quiet exercise in attention, grace, and gentle amusement. You sip your tea once more, letting the warmth and aroma ground you in the present moment, while your mind drifts lazily through the subtle intricacies of conversation, performance, and social elegance. Your attention now drifts to the ambient sounds surrounding you, the soft clink of silver spoons, the faint shuffle of skirts against carpet, and the occasional gentle cough carefully muffled by a gloved hand. Each noise punctuates the otherwise tranquil rhythm of the parlor, reminding you that even in silence, life continues with subtle activity. You feel the warmth of the tea in your chest spreading gradually, grounding your awareness in both body and space, while the faint aroma of pastries lingers, weaving with the soft scent of flowers from the window. It's an intricate tapestry of sensation, delicate and immersive. The mainstream historical fact here is that ambient sounds in Victorian parlors were considered part of the overall sensory orchestration of social gatherings. From the soft rustle of silk to the gentle clink of utensils, each sound contributed to the perception of refinement, calm, and attentiveness. Hosts often took care to regulate the auditory environment, ensuring that each moment supported the atmosphere of grace and civility. You realize that the room itself seems alive with these orchestrated nuances, a carefully tuned symphony of gentle domesticity. A quirky detail drifts into your consciousness. Some etiquette guides suggested that even the faintest sound, a cough, a chair scrape, or a subtle sigh, could convey emotion, judgment, or subtle social commentary. You picture an astute observer taking mental notes on every sound, interpreting the tone, duration, and context to gauge character, intention, or mood. The idea is amusing, yet strangely plausible, making you smile quietly as you listen more attentively to the delicate chorus of activity around you. Historians still argue whether such attentiveness to ambient noise was universally observed or largely promoted in etiquette manuals and aspirational writing. Nevertheless, the very notion encourages participants to become keenly aware of their surroundings, fostering a gentle mindfulness that combines auditory, visual, and tactile awareness. You notice yourself unconsciously adjusting your own posture, sip, and gestures to align with the rhythmic background, feeling the subtle interplay of control and relaxation. A soft laugh drifts into your mind as you imagine a secret Victorian guild of sound evaluators who traveled from parlor to parlor, judging decorum by the faintest auditory cues. Did someone's pinky brush the table ever so slightly? Was a spoon ever lifted with too much clatter? The playful absurdity of the idea contrasts nicely with the precision and ritual surrounding you, offering a gentle mental amusement. The hostess glides past, her steps measured and soft, almost blending seamlessly with the ambient chorus. She leans slightly toward a guest, whispers encouragement, or adjusts a napkin, all synchronized with the subtle sounds around her. You notice the delicate layering of auditory cues, a soft intake of breath before speaking, a carefully timed pause after a sip, the subtle clatter of a spoon. Each sound, part of a controlled, elegant symphony that keeps the parlor in a gentle, coordinated rhythm. Your gaze returns to the windows, where sunlight filters through lace curtains, casting soft, shifting patterns on the carpet. The movement of light plays against the auditory backdrop, creating a harmonious convergence of senses. You notice the gentle sway of leaves outside, the distant murmur of a garden fountain, and the occasional flutter of wings, each element contributing to the immersive environment. It is as if the entire space is orchestrated to foster calm attentiveness and soft delight, a multisensory meditation on social grace. You take another slow sip of tea, letting the warmth anchor your attention while the ambient sounds guide your mental focus. Each nuance, the faint scratch of a pencil as a guest records a note, the gentle rasp of pages turning in a book, the soft clink of a cup returned to its saucer, adds depth to the experience. You realize that participating in this environment requires both observation and patience, a quiet engagement with history that is as immersive as it is calming. A humorous image drifts in. Perhaps a future historian will reconstruct the entire social life of Victorian parlors through ambient sound recordings alone, deciphering hierarchy, etiquette, and mood from the rhythm of footsteps, the weight of coughs, and the precision of silverware placement. You smile at the idea, allowing it to mingle with the gentle absurdity and charm of your own quiet observations. Finally, you exhale deeply, letting the warmth of your tea and the ambient chorus wash over you. The intricate layering of sound, sight, and scent forms a cocoon of calm, inviting you to relax, observe, and participate in this gentle historical choreography. You feel suspended in a timeless moment, connected to centuries of subtle ritual, sensory attentiveness, and the quiet, whimsical joys of refined social life. You notice how the afternoon light has softened further, casting golden beams through the lace curtains, painting delicate patterns across the polished wood and fine fabrics. The interplay of light and shadow seems to breathe along with the quiet rhythm of the parlor, illuminating subtle gestures and gentle movements that might otherwise go unnoticed. You become aware of the way the golden glow highlights the smallest details. The shimmer of a spoon, the faint glint of a ring, the tiny movement of a fan adjusting a tilt of the head. Each reflection and shimmer draws your attention into the intricate ballet of daily ritual, a choreography of presence that feels simultaneously delicate and profound. The mainstream historical fact is that Victorian interiors were carefully designed to manipulate light, color, and texture to complement social rituals. Parlor furnishings, wall colors, and even lace patterns were chosen to reflect sunlight softly, emphasizing refinement and elegance. Lighting, natural or supplemented by oil lamps and candles, was part of an orchestrated sensory experience that helped guests engage in conversation, tea service, and observation without strain or harshness. You notice yourself unconsciously adjusting your gaze, tracing the shimmer and shadow with a quiet attentiveness. A quirky detail drifts into your awareness. Some households were rumored to time the placement of mirrors and reflective surfaces to catch specific sun angles during tea hours, creating fleeting illuminations on delicate teacups, silver, or floral arrangements. You imagine the amusement and subtle pride of a hostess who has perfected these sunlight cues, delighting in the soft surprise of glimmers across the room. The thought makes you smile, appreciating the marriage of practical design and whimsical artistry. Historians still argue whether these adjustments were common practice or the domain of only the most obsessive, status-conscious hosts. Regardless, the potential for orchestrated light underscores the care and intention woven into the smallest details of parlor life, reinforcing a sense of attentiveness and mindfulness. You lean back slightly, letting the interplay of sunlight and shadow deepen your perception of the room's subtle intricacies. Your attention returns to the guests, each engaged in quiet interaction. The golden light accentuates their gestures, a subtle lean toward a friend, a careful tilt of a cup, or a delicate flick of a fan. Each movement is amplified by the warm glow, lending a gentle theatricality to otherwise mundane actions. You mimic these subtleties in small ways, feeling the harmony of body, environment, and social rhythm merge into a calming flow. A humorous notion surfaces. Perhaps Victorian parlors were early experiments in immersive theater, with sunlight serving as a lighting designer, mirrors as stage props, and guests as performers in a slow, elegant drama of etiquette. You suppress a quiet laugh, letting the whimsy mingle with the meditative rhythm of observation. Each gesture, sip, and glance becomes simultaneously playful and purposeful, a gentle ballet that rewards careful attention. The hostess moves again, adjusting a curtain slightly to capture a better angle of sunlight, ensuring that the reflection lands perfectly across the polished table and china. You notice the tiny ripple of delight on a guest's face as the light catches a ring, highlighting its understated elegance. The choreography of the environment, the movement of air, light, and people, blends seamlessly, creating a multisensory landscape that is simultaneously calming, entertaining, and immersive. You take a careful sip of tea, letting the warmth mingle with the soft, golden light on your fingertips and the aroma lingering from pastries and freshly baked bread. The sensory combination deepens your immersion, heightening the gentle attentiveness that the parlor's orchestration encourages. The sunlight, reflections, and shadows act as quiet reminders of time's passage, rhythmically framing the experience in measured, comforting intervals. Another whimsical thought drifts in. Perhaps the angle of sunlight, the shimmer of silver, and the precise movement of a fan were all secret messages, subtle cues meant to test observation skills or convey a private joke among hosts and guests. You smile at the idea, letting your mind wander in gentle speculation while remaining grounded in the tranquil, ambient experience surrounding you. Finally, you exhale, letting your senses settle into the gentle harmony of light, sound, scent, and movement. The room feels alive yet profoundly calming. Every flicker of sunlight, whispered comment, and reflective shimmer adding layers to the meditative experience. You feel a quiet sense of connection to the people around you, to the rhythms of the past, and to the timeless, gentle art of presence that the parlor cultivates with such understated elegance. You notice the subtle shift in atmosphere as the afternoon drifts toward evening. The sunlight has softened to a honey glow, the shadows lengthening across the polished floors and lace-draped windows. The gentle hum of activity in the parlor seems quieter, slower, as if the room itself is exhaling after the concentrated attentiveness of earlier rituals. You take a measured sip of tea, feeling its warmth settle comfortably in your chest, and allow your gaze to wander over the carefully curated details of the room, each one infused with the subtle authority of centuries-old etiquette. The mainstream historical fact is that Victorian tea rituals often transitioned in tempo as the day progressed. Afternoon tea began as a structured social exercise. Sandwiches, scones, pastries, tea. But as the day waned, the pace naturally slowed, giving guests space for reflection, soft conversation, and more intimate observation. This change in rhythm encouraged a gentle wind-down, a natural shift from attentiveness to relaxation while maintaining decorum. You notice yourself participating unconsciously in this temporal ebb, your body and mind adjusting to the slower cadence. A quirky detail drifts into your awareness. Some parlors maintain small mechanical hourglasses or sand timers to subtly signal the passage of time between courses or conversational segments. You imagine these tiny instruments hidden in plain sight, quietly nudging guests into rhythm without overt announcement. A whimsical and precise orchestration of social pacing. The mental image makes you smile softly, appreciating the interplay between formality and gentle creativity. Historians still argue whether such timing devices were commonly used or largely aspirational tools in etiquette manuals. Regardless, their conceptual presence underscores the degree of mindfulness expected in parlor interactions. You observe the room's gradual transformation, noting the softer voices, the slower gestures, and the gentle stretching of previously rigid attention spans. Each movement now carries a sense of calm intention, as if the room itself is guiding you toward a relaxed, contemplative state. Your eyes settle on a guest reading a small leather-bound book, her finger tracing lines silently while the soft light reflects off the gilded edges of the pages. The combination of reading, sipping tea, and observing the room creates a layered sensory experience, blending sight, sound, and taste. You feel a quiet sense of harmony, participating without words, fully absorbed in the orchestrated tranquility of the environment. A playful thought surfaces. Perhaps these quiet interludes were the true prize of Victorian tea, a chance to observe, reflect, and engage in subtle mental games while appearing perfectly composed. You imagine guests silently competing to notice the smallest detail, a glimmer of jewelry, a fleeting expression, a subtle gesture, turning observation into a gentle sport of awareness. The humor mingles with your relaxed state, deepening the pleasure of immersion. The hostess drifts past again, her movements unhurried, precise, and harmonized with the room's softened energy. She adjusts a curtain slightly, straightens a silver tray, and offers a subtle nod of acknowledgement to a guest, maintaining the delicate balance between authority and unobtrusive guidance. You notice how her presence orchestrates calm without overt control, a subtle mastery of space, time, and attention. You take another measured sip of tea, letting the flavor linger while inhaling the faint aroma of pastries, polished wood, and floral accents. The room seems to expand in quiet layers of observation, sensation, and gentle mental engagement. Each sound, the faint clink of porcelain, the rustle of a skirt, the soft whisper of a conversation, integrates seamlessly into the meditative rhythm, a slow symphony of sensory and social nuance. A humorous thought drifts in. Perhaps future historians will reconstruct Victorian life entirely from these slow interludes, concluding that sipping tea, observing shadows, and counting glances were the ultimate markers of refinement. You smile softly, imagining them awarding imaginary medals for patience, perception, and elegance. The whimsy makes the ambient calm richer, blending humor with attentive observation in a uniquely soothing way. Finally, you exhale, letting the gentle cadence of sound, movement, and scent envelope your consciousness. The soft glow of fading sunlight, the quiet orchestration of gestures, and the lingering warmth of tea coalesce into a moment of tranquil presence. You feel both participant and observer, connected across time through ritual, rhythm, and the subtle joys of attentive, playful, and deliberate engagement in the parlor. You feel the room's energy shifting almost imperceptibly, as though the parlor itself is preparing for closure. Conversations have softened into murmurs, gestures are slower, and the previously orchestrated cadence of movement has relaxed into gentle, unhurried motions. You cradle your teacup one last time, noticing how the warmth radiates through your fingers and into your chest, grounding you in the moment. The aroma of tea mingles with faint traces of pastries, polished wood, and floral accents, creating a comforting sensory halo that envelops you entirely. It's as if the room itself is whispering a soft farewell, an invitation to pause and breathe. The mainstream historical fact is that Victorian tea rituals often concluded with a gradual wind down rather than abrupt endings. Guests lingered, finishing sips and bites, exchanging gentle farewells and partaking in subtle postures of gratitude and acknowledgement. The conclusion of tea service was as deliberate as its beginning, emphasizing decorum, mindfulness, and gentle reflection. You notice the care with which the hostess circulates one last time, offering understated nods, soft smiles, and slight adjustments to ensure everyone departs with dignity and tact. A quirky detail drifts into your mind. Some parlors kept small tokens or personalized notes for departing guests, sometimes placed under cups or folded neatly alongside napkins. These gestures, subtle and private, added a layer of intimacy and whimsy to the ritual, blending observation, kindness, and gentle humor. You imagine discovering one such token, perhaps a tiny folded flower or a handwritten quip, and feeling an unexpected thrill at the thoughtfulness of a centuries-old practice. Historians still argue whether these small tokens were widespread or merely the province of particularly attentive hosts. Regardless, they represent the layered attention to detail, the blending of ritual, social grace, and personal connection that typified Victorian tea culture. You lean back slightly, observing how even small gestures, an adjusted napkin, a slightly shifted cup, a whispered word, reinforce the sense of presence and participation that has been cultivated across the afternoon. Your gaze drifts to the now fading sunlight streaming through lace curtains. Shadows lengthen and blur, softening edges and lending a painterly quality to the room. The intricate dance of light, shadow, and reflection feels meditative, echoing the delicate choreography of social gestures, the rhythm of conversation, and the attentive sipping of tea. You realize that even as the day draws to a close, the room remains a gentle symphony of sensory, social, and emotional resonance. A playful thought surfaces. Perhaps the ultimate measure of refinement was not perfect etiquette or ideal timing, but the ability to fully inhabit the experience of tea, observing, sipping, listening, and participating with gentle attentiveness. You smile quietly at the whimsical notion, allowing it to coexist with your appreciation for the structured rituals and sensory delights that have guided your experience. The hostess gives a final, discreet nod, signaling the informal conclusion of the ritual. Guests gather their belongings slowly, adjusting gloves, hats, or shawls with the same understated precision that characterized the tea itself. You notice how even departure is orchestrated, a gentle flow of movement, that maintains decorum while allowing a sense of release and completion,